This is Federalist 50, Part 1. Remember, in the last Federalist, Madison said, we have read, we have listened to Mr. Jefferson's suggestion that we need to convene a body, have a convention every so often when 2/3 of the legislature decides that it's good time to review the laws, review even the Constitution, and see what's wrong with it. And Madison talked about it. He said, well, as wise as Mr. Jefferson is, we have to remember that if you have too many of these conventions, passions take over. One reason that we did well early part of the revolution with the state constitutions is because people were under this in a war, so they would listen to their leaders. They would at least sacrifice part of their fashion. But now that's not going to be expected from people. You can't expect that. You can't be realistic. Because people, they'll choose representatives, and those representatives will do exactly what people want. And a lot of times what people want is not necessarily reasonable, even though we want to count on their opinions. But maybe somebody will mislead them, and they will ask for the wrong thing, something that won't be good for the long-term future of them, their communities. So Madison has to walk a very tight line. In one sense, he says, people are the fountain of power. That was the belief back then. That was what the government was founded on. But at the same time, he has to diplomatically say, well, these same people usually or sometimes will not act reasonably. Their opinions, instead of sound judgment, based on sound judgment and reflection, will be their passions. And that is something that's realistic and we have to expect. So because of that, he was hesitant to say, okay, every so often, when 2/3 of the legislature decides, we will have a convention. Now here in Federalist 50, he says some people have said that we'll have periodic conventions. In other words, there will be a set date every 2 years, every 1 year, every 3 years. We'll have a convention to review what the Constitution is like. And he says this is bad too. But he has to be very careful because back then, especially right after the revolution, you got rid of the British because the British were acting in a way that they were not caring about what American people thought, people of different states. So you don't want to come across, Madison didn't want to come across like, oh, we can't trust the people. We have to listen to them. We have to listen to them every year, every 2 years. We have to let them start a convention. And that's not what Madison wanted because he could not trust the representatives that these people would elect to act impartially, to act fairly, to act without considerations of what their party was wanting, what their personal interest was would be in it. So Madison has to diplomatically again say, no, periodic conventions are not a good idea because let's say if you choose a short period, you say let's say every 6 months, you'll have a convention to look and see who has overstepped its bound. Let's change the Constitution. He says that's just too short of a too short of a time, too short of a length of time for people to act reasonably, to not be impartial. They're going to be partial. They're going to take sides and let their passions take over. And if it is too long of a period that this convention is going to convene in, then he says the people that are in power won't care. They say, well, we're going to do the wrong thing. We'll let them in 5-10 years from now correct it. We're going to take advantage of the situation, regardless of what's good for the long-term interest of the country. And Madison again turns to the council in Pennsylvania that was supposed to overlook what the legislature had done. He said, look at the text, the transcript of what they said. Most of the people that were supposed to act impartially in this council, look at the work of the legislature. These were the same people that 6 months earlier, a year earlier, had been part of the legislature, had been part of one party or the other, and all they did was fight against one another. So is this the same thing is going to happen if we have periodic conventions to check the Constitution? You'll just be at a gridlock, nothing is going to happen. So he says, let's not mess with the constitutions every year or every 2 years, for the reason that people who are going to be checking it are going to be people that are going to be partial. They're going to take sides. Plus, as he said in Federalist 49, if you do that too often, people lose trust in the stability of government. They say, what kind of government is this that we have to change every 6 months? What kind of constitution is it if we have to change it every year? People are not going to invest. People are not going to have confidence in establishing jobs, opening new businesses. So those are the things that you need to keep in mind. So I'll start reading Federalist 50. It may be contended, perhaps, that instead of occasional appeals to the people, which are liable to the objections urged against them, periodical appeals, every period, every so often. So occasional is no longer good. Periodical is not going to be good either. Periodical appeals are the proper and adequate means of preventing and correcting infractions of the Constitution. It will be attended to that in the examination of these expedients, I confine myself to the aptitude for enforcing the Constitution by keeping the several departments of power within their due bounds, without particularly considering them as provisions for altering the Constitution itself. In the first view, appeals to the people at fixed periods appears to be nearly as ineligible as appeals on particular occasions as they emerge. If the periods be separated by short intervals, the measures to be reviewed and rectified will have been of recent date and will be connected with all the circumstances which tend to vitiate and pervert the result of occasional revisions. If the periods be distant from each other, the same remark will be applicable to all recent measures, and in proportion as the remoteness of the others may favor a dispassionate review of them, this disadvantage is inseparable from inconveniences which seem to counterbalance it. In the first place, a distant prospect of public censure would be a very feeble restraint on power from those excesses. In other words, like I said, if this periodical convention is like every 10 years, it's not going to stop people that want to take advantage of the situations do so. Because they're going to say, let's just take advantage of the situation. If it's going to be money that's coming to us, let's pocket the money. And in 10 years, the hell with them. Let them fix it. Let us and the group that we represent benefit from it. And who cares about what happens 10 years from now? It is to be imagined that a legislative assembly consisting of 100 or 200 members, eagerly bent on some favorite object and breaking through the restraint of the Constitution in pursuit of it, would be arrested in their career by considerations drawn from censorial revisions of their conduct at the future distance of 10, 15, or 20 years. So you can't arrest them. He means you can't stop them. It's not to put them in jail, but he's talking about you can't stop their project. In the next place, the abuses would often have completed their mischievous effects before the remedial provision would be applied. And in the last place, where this might not be the case, they would be of long standing, would have taken deep root, and would not easily be extirpated. So Madison has to be very careful not to say anything, to say, people, hey, we don't trust you. We don't trust you to have this convention every 5 years, because after all, you are the fountain of power. But at the same time, he wants to tell them there's not much benefit to this periodical checking on us, on the government, not on the government, on the Constitution and the legislature and them. So he's saying all of these to say that human being, even if they are good, when you give them power, they can be corrupted. So we're going to just take it for granted that majority of the people, if not all of them, that are going to go hold office, they're going to get corrupted. So we have to, within this machinery of government, we're going to set up a system not to let this corruption go for a long time and contaminate the other branches. And again, like I said, he wants to make sure, like he's going to say in Federalist 51, ambition is going to be there, but we're going to put ambition to counteract ambition, stop it.